What's up, everybody? Noble Comics here, and today I want to look at the 5 most forgotten characters in Marvel history. Now, Marvel has tons of characters, thousands and thousands of heroes over the years, and most of them never really got popular. They were one-off, and they are ultimately forgotten. But I want to specifically look at characters that were popular at a time and have since been forgotten for one reason or another. Characters that really could have worked out and been something special, but ultimately were left to the wayside. So let's go ahead. We'll start with number 5, and I'm already going to break the rules here, and I'm going to start with the team. And these are the Inhumans. Now, most people know who the Inhumans are, or at least they've heard of them. And as I was thinking of this list, many Inhumans came to mind. Black Bolt, Karnak, Medusa, all these characters who were popular and definitely have had a footprint in the Marvel Universe. They've appeared in different animated series, like the old Fantastic Four animated series, for example. They've, of course, more recently had a TV series that failed. Black Bolt, of course, appeared in the Doctor Strange 2 movie. So they're not characters that nobody knows, but as far as a Marvel property goes, they are one of the most left behind and forgotten. And I think the issue with the Inhumans is that they fit a very specific niche that for the most part is already fulfilled by, like, the X-Men. They're characters who have these powers from essentially like an accident, but it's kind of something they're born with. Also kind of like the X-Men. They're a marginalized group, kind of like the X-Men, but most of the characters are less interesting and they're less relatable. They're kind of like a dollar store X-Men, but they definitely have an interesting mythology there and have some really cool characters. Personally, I love Black Bolt and Karnak, two of my favorite comic book characters ever, but they do suffer from being a little bit too niche and never really catching on. And again, like I said, they're not really relatable in any way. Like the X-Men are very relatable. The Inhumans, not so much, because they're sort of this kingdom, and a lot of focus is on that, less on their weird circumstance of getting their abilities and being outcasts and things like that. There's not really a core, interesting story to those characters, I don't think, like you have with other properties. And it just seems like they're a doomed to fail property. Like I said, their TV show failed and it really did suck. They've had some good comic runs over the years, but I don't think there's really been, like, a breakout comic series for them either. They're an interesting concept that never really took off the way it deserved. Number 4 is going to be Blue Marvel. Now, Blue Marvel is one of these characters that genuinely I'm surprised is not more popular, doesn't have a movie or a TV show, or even like an ongoing comic series or anything like that. Because Blue Marvel, I feel like for a few years in like the 2000s, was set up to be like the next big Marvel character. He was this Superman-esque hero. He's pretty cool. He's very powerful. He's like on the upper end of power. He's very smart. He's a black character, and you know, modern comics are definitely making a push towards diversity, so you'd think this is the perfect character, like queued up for the next phase of Marvel properties. But it seems like nothing ever really happened with him, because like I said, he was interesting enough. He had a pretty cool story. I mean, he had pretty cool feats and showings in, you know, the few comics that he appeared in. But beyond that, they didn't really do much with him. It seemed like there was a lot of wasted potential with Blue Marvel. I don't know if something happened, somebody, you know, a top exec made a call and said, hey, we're stop pushing Blue Marvel, it's not happening. I don't know, but he never really took off the way he should have. And it could just be due to the fact that he didn't have any real arcs. He didn't really have like a breakout comic, I don't think. He was just sort of a cool character who was around that just needed more time to be built upon and have more cool things shown for him. He also could have potentially been a little bit too perfect, you know, because he is super powerful and super smart and all these different things. Maybe they cued him to be too good of a character and they needed him to be a little bit more relatable or a little bit more interesting, because while he did have a lot of cool things going for him and he was very powerful, which is cool, he did seem to be pretty stagnant over time, which is uninteresting, right? His character needs to evolve and change and have some struggles and everything like that, and I just don't think we saw that. Not to mention that it is an uphill battle to make a new popular character, because again, most of the popular Marvel characters are decades and decades old at this point, so that can be a problem also. And he's not really a typical Marvel character. He actually is pretty similar to what I would think a typical DC character would have been. More of like the cape and the tights, Superman archetype superhero. And for Marvel, you see less of that. There definitely are characters like that, but you see less of that, so maybe Marvel readers just didn't stick to him. Who knows, but for whatever reason, he did not take off. And it is a shame because he definitely could have been a Marvel powerhouse of a character if he was properly developed, but now he is just sort of a forgotten character that we've moved past. Moving on to number 3, we have Namorita, and honestly most of the New Warriors, the team she was part of. And she was a character that is like riddled with issues. Now, she has had many appearances over the years. She first appeared in 1972 and had appearances all the way up to 2006, but I feel like most people don't even know who she is. And the problem is, she is Namor's cousin. So she's like already pretty much a redundant character because she's just a female Namor. And Namor is already a pretty forgotten character. I mean, he just had his appearance in Black Panther 2, so now, you know, the common man has heard of him. But before that, nobody knew who Namor was, who's like an actual comic book normie, right? Of course, comic book fans know him, but most people didn't. And even in the comic world, Namor definitely is one of the more underutilized characters, and so Namorita really didn't stand a chance. She was this character who was pretty cool, I guess, but she never really broke through in her own right. She was always, of course, tied to Namor and Atlantis, which is infamously a very hard storyline to make work, both in Marvel and DC. Nobody likes the water stuff. Nobody likes Atlantis. And again, she did have a ton of different appearances, but she never really got a good foothold. She never really got her own storylines or character development or anything like that. And it could just be because she is sort of a not unique character, right? She didn't really have any unique personality traits or powers or look or story or really anything. Again, she was just sort of a female Namor, but a worse character who doesn't have the roots that Namor had. And they tried to make her popular and to really make her work. But she never really did, and she got killed off in 2006 in the Civil War storyline, and I don't think she's been back since. And so I think at this point she's a character that we've pretty much all just moved past and forgotten about. And in this case, I'll say it's maybe for the better. Moving to number 2. Now this one is personal to me. Number 2 is the original Nick Fury. Now, a lot of people, especially more modern comic book fans, when they think Nick Fury, they think of Samuel Jackson, right? But Nick Fury wasn't Sam Jackson for like 60 years almost. Originally, starting from the 60s, he was like a white, post-World War II CIA spy, badass type of character. Definitely had a lot of Solid Snake vibes before Solid Snake came out. And he was like a total, ruthless, badass intellectual. He was always ready for anything. He was always one step ahead of everybody else. There was even a Nick Fury movie that came out. But nowadays, like, that character has been totally erased. The Sam Jackson version was actually from the Ultimates universe, right? Which was sort of a, split universe from the 616. They had their own things going on. And I guess he just got more popular there, and they made the switch at some point, and the original Nick Fury just completely got left behind, which does suck, because he was edgy, and he was mean, and he was problematic for sure, but that's what made him awesome. That was great. He was a very old school badass. And he got replaced by someone who was more diverse and friendly and popular. Definitely the movies made Sam Jackson way more popular. But the actual character Nick Fury, who was so important to the Marvel Universe, just got totally destroyed. They completely destroyed his character. And last I saw was during like the Unworthy Thor storylines from forever ago, where he was like chained to the moon and left behind, literally forgotten by everybody else. And I think forgotten by many comic book readers, and maybe not even known about by newer comic book fans who are influenced mostly by the movies. OG Nick Fury definitely deserved better, and he should definitely make a comeback. I would love to see a revival series where the character's back, doing pretty much anything. Marvel, hire me, I'll write it if you want me to. But until then, he is one of the most forgotten characters, tragically forgotten characters in Marvel history. Now, before we get to number 1, I have a few honorable mentions. So, like I said, there are a lot of Marvel characters who have been forgotten over the years. So, let's run through some of these honorable mentions. I have Night Thrasher, another member of the New Warriors, who was very popular for a time and still has like a cult fan base. He does still show up in his own series from time to time, so he's not totally forgotten, but for the most part, he has been memory hold. Same thing with Hellcat, who at one point was pretty popular and was kind of a staple Marvel female character, also kind of got left behind. Stingray wasn't ever really that popular, but his design is so cool that I think we need to see more of him. Another team like the Champions are pretty much forgotten. They tried to revive it a few times, never really worked. The Secret Avengers, West Coast Avengers, any of these offshoot groups usually get left behind as well. And then, of course, the most forgotten character, Forget-Me-Not. That's a joke, he's not actually number 1. But definitely some good honorable mentions there. And with that out of the way, let's get into the actual number 1 most forgotten character in all of Marvel history. And that is going to be the Human Torch. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, the Human Torch, he's part of the Fantastic Four. He appears semi-regularly, right? Whenever the Fantastic Four show up. He's a fleshed out character. How can he be the most forgotten? But Johnny Storm is not the original Human Torch. Back in the late 1930s, Marvel had a different Human Torch. This is actually their second ever hero created. The first being Namor, of course. The second being Jim Hammond, the Human Torch. And he was different than Johnny Storm that we see today. He was actually an android who had the ability to self-combust and turn to fire. And he had all the same powers as the Human Torch does, but he was a very different character. He's also a founding member of Marvel's Invaders, who were, of course, the World War II group of heroes of Namor, Captain America, Jim Hammond, and some others. And at the time, right, he was actually a pretty big deal. He was up there as, again, one of the most original Marvel characters that you can get, number 2. And yet today, almost nobody knows that he exists. He almost makes no appearances. Every now and again, I think he does appear, but he makes pretty much no appearances. And I think that's because comics from this era, from like the 40s, late 30s to the 60s, pretty much that golden age of comics, I think a lot of stuff was still getting figured out. And a lot of what was created then didn't stick, especially for Marvel. A lot of what DC did actually did stick, but for Marvel, not as much. And so these bigger characters they had back then pretty much got overshadowed during that 60s Silver Age boom, where like Stan Lee and Kirby and everybody were just cranking out all of the most popular heroes. Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Black Panther, X-Men, Hulk. Everybody was during that era. And I think that really did overshadow everybody that came before. And so they took a character who semi-worked, like the Human Torch, and they said, let's repurpose this character into my new team, which is, the Fantastic Four. Let's redo who he is and his origin. And so the original just kind of got left behind. He was a building block towards one of the greatest teams in comics ever, the Fantastic Four, and the birth of really that comic book, Marvel Comics boom of the 60s. And he really was left behind. An instrumental character in the creation of the entirety of Marvel Comics, and pretty much nobody knows who he is. Nobody knows that he existed, and anytime you try and look him up, you look up the Human Torch, he doesn't even show up usually. It's always Johnny Storm. Which is a real shame, because he is an important character, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's the most interesting or the coolest character ever, but he is important. He probably does deserve better. He probably does deserve a place in Marvel Comics. And same goes for Namor while I'm at it. Both of those characters, the original Marvel characters, kind of don't get as much love as they deserve, I don't think. But to a degree, they did serve their purpose, and now we have what we have. It is nice to see them whenever they do make an appearance, though. If you guys haven't read Marvels, this is that comic that is drawn by Alex Ross. Definitely go check it out. It gives you a very interesting look at the early years of Marvel all the way through the 60s. It's very cool. It's, of course, beautiful artwork as well. And both Namor and Jim Hammond, Human Torch, do make an appearance there. And with that all said, those are my top 5 most forgotten characters in all of Marvel Comics. Let me know what you think. Do you know all of these characters? Are there characters that you think are more forgotten than these? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.